Listen, Mr. McCabe, I'm a whore and I know an awful lot about whorehouses. Well, I know that if you had a house up here, you stand to make yourself a lot of money. Now, this is all you've got to do. Put up the money for the house. I'll do all the rest. I'll look after the girls, the business, the expenses, the running, the furnishing, everything. And I'll pay you back any money you put in the house, so you won't lose nothing. And we'll make it 50-50.
Excuse me, you know, already got a whorehouse operating.
You can't call them crib cows whores. I'm talking about a proper sporting house with class girls and clean linen and proper hygiene.
Well, I don't think you're going to find my clientele up here too interested in that sort of thing.
They will be once they get a taste of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Not Content Podcast. My name is Jerome here. As part of the From the Q Podcasting Network, here tonight we are going to be discussing 1971's McCabe and Mrs. Miller. This was Robert Altman's follow-up to his 1970 smash hit, MASH. My co-host, as always, is Brian, and if you would like to leave a 4 or 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, please get those positive algorithms going. If you want, you should also like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Click the bell icon for those notifications. Brian, last week, you were not as impressed by Nashville as I was, but you definitely enjoyed McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and I think we are both on the same wavelength about this movie. Brian, all I can say is I really wanted the coats that the characters were wearing. That was my big takeaway. I was like, these coats seem incredibly warm and comfortable. And Brian, I know you're not used to this living in Los Angeles, but when you live in the Midwest, you need a really warm coat.
Yes, I've seen the pictures of the pimp coats throughout history. It seems as if Warren Beatty had one of the more influential pimp coats in history. It looked like he literally killed a buffalo or something and just put it on his back. But you can't help but think of like what a pimp coat is and does and represent today in today's culture. I mean, my goodness, look at The Godfather from the Attitude Era. I think at one point he did have a coat besides the vest, but my goodness, the fact that this guy is a pimp with a pimp coat in the Old West. Come on, man, how great is that? That's pimp, as if what they would say in 2002. But my goodness, I think the look of this movie, Jerome, is like so unique. And let's kind of put things into perspective here first, because for you to understand McCabe and Mrs. Miller, first of all, Robert Altman is kind of doing an anti-Western. He's kind of said that on record. It's like an anti-Western.
And I hate that term. I want to say for the record, I don't like that term usually because even anti-Westerns, like some people say Unforgiven is an anti-Western. It's not. It really does kind of fall into the same tropes. It's really good. I really like it, but it's not that. It is truly, like, this place is miserable. I would never want to live there. Like, sometimes you'll watch a Western and you're like, I would kind of live there. Like, it seems pretty cool. This is not, I would never want to live there. Everything is so dirty and cold, and the people are, I think this is a purposeful choice. People are dumb. Oh man, it's just this. But again, this feels real. And I think that's the thing that Robert Altman does better than anybody else, is to make the places that he shoots feel real.
For sure. So what he did was he filmed in this town in Washington, but in order to make it look like it's actually chronological in order to the story, they started out by like half building everything and putting up tents, and it made it seem like the town was under construction, and they filmed it in chronological order. So by the time that they start filming the actual stuff of the town, when it starts built, that's actually built up, that's the part of the movie where you see that, oh my God, this town has been built up from nothing because of this man. So I think in terms of like planning out like the shooting schedule and the way that the set was built, it was perfect and genius on so many levels, because it shows you literally a town being built throughout the movie, and that's what they needed for the construction, so they didn't have to like, build the set really quick and then tear it down and then put some parts of the set back up again because they shoot it out of order. In this case, they just said, let's make it easier on ourselves. We'll shoot it in order, and we'll just continuously show the town grow in the background with the construction. That way we won't have to worry about the sets being done on certain time frames or whatever, and then having to, like I said, deconstruct it, reconstruct the set. That would have been a nightmare. So in this case, that was a smart move, and it actually works out for everyone else because it does make the town seem like it's literally growing in the background of the movie, which I think is awesome in terms of like the visual. And then when it comes to the visual of this movie, Jerome, have you noticed that there's no sharp black colors? Every time there's a black color, it's like faded out, and it seems like the film stock is faded out. Did you notice that?
Yeah, this is not the kind of movie that you want to get 4K for because it's going to be worthless. I mean, this is a very dark and dank movie, and that is a choice, but I think it's a choice that works out. And I think the magic of this movie, last week when we talked about Nashville, that was all about the fact that there were so many characters. And look, there are a lot of characters in this movie, but the two major ones that we can focus on are Warren Beatty and Julie Christie. Their performances are what carry this movie, I think. Warren Beatty playing John McCabe. The magic of McCabe, and I think that Altman does such a good job of representing this well. And I'm going to cue Brian up for his famous line in a moment. But McCabe plays this guy who has this reputation of being a killer, and like the town is perceived as lazy, and he's going to kind of lift the town up by their bootstraps because he's going to run this what amounts to a whorehouse. And I'm trying not to use that as a I'm trying to be respectful when I say that, but like let's be honest, that's what it is. And he basically hires Julie Christie as Constance Miller. Constance Miller is clearly the smarter of the two, but John McCabe has a penis, so he is regarded as kind of being this genius, but he's revealed to be a complete fraud. And Brian, I have to tell you that in these times when you have somebody who is regarded to be a complete fraud, even though they have a reputation for being a quote unquote businessman, all you can say, Brian, is what?
The view never changes, Daddy. The view never changes.
No, it really doesn't. And McCabe pays for it in the end with his life. That's the other thing, Brian, about any movie that takes place in the 1970s. The odds are really good that the main character is going to die.
In the snow, no less. Like, I feel like that's a thing. In the snow. Well, let's just kind of explain McCabe for a second, because at first when you see McCabe, you think he's this genius. I think you're supposed to think he's a genius. And then he kind of just reveals his ass throughout the whole movie. It's like he has these like metaphors and euphemisms, or not euphemisms, but like anecdotes and stuff that really don't amount or like have anything to do with the actual conversation. He's just kind of saying those things to look smart. And then you realize, oh, this dude really has just been lucked out by the fact that like Julie Christie comes in and saves his business. That's basically what it breaks down to. Because what happens is he comes to this town. This town is like starting up from scratch. So he decides to build a whorehouse. And he gets 3 women at first. And then you start realizing that this guy has no idea of like anything about like care or like health care or like women's health care or like having these, women be healthy and clean, quote unquote. And it's just like, this dude is out to lunch. And then Julie Christie somehow like hears from like a distance and then comes to the town and is like, okay, are you doing this, this, and this, and this? And he's like, well, I'm a businessman. I'm smart, blah, blah, blah. And I can do these things. Who are you? And then she starts explaining all the ins and outs to him that he just doesn't understand about the business. And then it's like, okay, you're on board for sure. You got more of an idea what to do than I do. And she basically turns his business around. And just like business is booming and becomes the heart of like the economy of the town as it grows in the middle of the movie. So that's where you get the pimp coat coming in, and then him just like, not selling out to these prospectors, I guess you'd call them, trying to get this land. And then that kind of turns out to the shootout at the end. And that's basically what it breaks down to. And it's a 2-hour movie, and Nashville's 2 hours and 40 minutes. And when Nashville, by the end of the movie, I kind of wanted less from Nashville in terms of like a running time. And by the end of this movie, I wanted more. Like I really wanted more. And because of like all the themes of this movie, gambling, prostitution, and like the old West, and like what really was like the true America in the mid 1800s, about what really was the great economy of America. And it actually comes from like whorehouses and drinking and all that saloons and shit. Like that was the heart of it. You get that in this movie for sure. And I just wanted more of that. And of course you get that in Deadwood. And if you look up the creator of Deadwood, I forget his name, but he really cites this movie as a big influence. And it's clear, absolutely clear, that it's an influence on Deadwood. So in terms of that, I love Deadwood.
And Deadwood is incredible. I mean, it's just. I mean, the character of Al Swearingen might be one of the best characters that's ever been created. And I think in a lot of ways, if McCabe grows up like he becomes Al, right?
That's what I think too, man. And I mean, there were no jokes about California or San Francisco cocksuckers in this movie, but they do talk about the Chinese, and it's like because the Chinese are very much
right. Because there's a lot of racist Chinese in both Deadwood and in this movie, and also. Knowing the character that Rene Auberjonois plays on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, this movie is deeply funny for that reason too.
Yeah, for some reason I know his face, but I can never pronounce his name, and I remember why, because it's that long extended name.
Pronunciation guide right in front of me, but he plays Odo on Deep Space Nine, and Odo is like...
That's where I recognize him from, and I never watched Deep Space Nine, but I recognize his makeup from that very distinctly.
He's so good on that show, and he plays like almost a completely... different character in this movie, but his face.
He almost plays the same character from Deadwood. That was God. What's his name? The slime ball that was in Blade Runner. You know what I'm talking about? He's like that.
Yeah, the character name is not coming back to me.
Yeah, but he goes around like Al, and he goes like he's sucking up to Al, and he's sucking up to all the other characters, and he's sucking up to the sheriff, and that's the same role he's doing in this. So I was like, okay. You can tell like how much of an influence this was to Deadwood completely in terms of the character structures as well. Again, Shelley Duvall gets wasted in this, and I'm just like, my goodness, they set her up. She's not a star.
I think you have to separate this. It's like she is clearly in this movie, which is 1971. She has a small part. She has a slightly bigger role in Nashville. She goes on to do Three Sisters in 1977. That is her breakout. So she is like being slowly pushed up the card by Robert Altman. That's how you have to see it.
I just felt like they set up that story where her husband's killed and she wasn't really into her husband anyway. I thought it was leading to something, but it just kind of leads to her just becoming another prostitute and living a good life, I guess. But, because they put like 10 minutes of screen time on her character, and I was waiting for something to happen. Because in comparison to this and Nashville, there's an actual like good plot storyline in this that I was really like hooked into. Because by the end of it, it's like the same thing. Like, are they going to sell their prospects? Are they going to sell the land? What's going to happen? Are they going to have bounty hunters on them? Turns out they got the bounty hunters on them. But, I think this movie, in terms of, like, the performances, man, Julie Christie just owns it. Like, she's got this confidence in the role.
Incredible.
Yeah. The way she, like... the $5 scene? Like, the $5 scene just really, like, gets me. It's just, like, they're naming all the prices, and she's like, I'm $5, and the guy's like, $5? Everyone else is like $1.30, and she's like, she looks at him and she gives him this look, and the dude's like, okay, I'll pay the $5. And I was just like, oh shit, damn! Like she's really got that main event kind of attraction draw going on.
The way that she takes control against Warren Beatty, and those two dated for 7 years, and it's surprising to me because Warren Beatty is kind of known as a control freak, and like this movie is one of the reasons that he really wanted to start kind of directing his own stuff. Or having more of a voice in the director because he didn't really have as much control here. But it's so interesting to me because I think Warren Beatty, like he gets a lot. Altman gets a lot out of Beatty in this movie, and I don't know that you get a lot out of Beatty in other movies. Like I think he's really good in The Parallax View. He's really good in Shampoo, but like the returns definitely become limited once you get into the 1980s. But I think part of the other thing that impresses me so much about Julie Christie is like she got nominated for an Academy Award for lead actress, and I don't know if you realize this, but she is only on screen for 25 minutes.
Oh, I noticed, and I looked that up too, and I was kind of like, well, I guess you've argued this before whenever I've brought this argument up that she's the star, and I guess that they got to treat them like stars, and you got to put him as the lead and bill him as the lead, even though the screen time is limited. And we've had this discussion before, primarily about Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Lecter. That's usually the prime example of that. But I think she still deserved it. I think, like in terms of like performance-wise, she deserves a nomination for sure.
She is technically the lead actress in this movie. Like that's the one thing I'll say is that in terms of like the other female roles, like they're very clearly not designed to be the lead. Like this is a leading actress role, even though she's only on screen for a certain amount of time. Like Hannibal Lecter, Like, he's not, like, Anthony Hopkins is arguably the bigger star, but he is not arguably the lead male performance.
Yeah, that's kind of where we've had this discussion and like these different examples come up. But um, yeah, I think in terms of like the overall look again, like I want to mention the look of this movie. So what happened is Robert Altman decided to do a technique that was very risky at the time. It's called flashing. So basically, back in the day, everything was shot on 35 millimeter film stock. You're not supposed to expose film stock before it's actually film on, right? No light, no nothing, because it ruins the film stock. So what this technique is, they gently use some light on the film stock before they even filmed with it. Then they film with it, and now you get this unique look of like a movie that's only going to look like this ever. Like there's only going to be one movie that looks like this, and it's going to be McCabe and Mrs. Miller, because no other movie has ever even chosen to do a technique like this for a movie. So that's why the colors are kind of like faded out, but certain colors do pop. Like there was this one scene that just kind of like blew me away for like the stupidest reason, but like we're in Mrs. Miller's room, and she's got this like quilt.
I mean, the argument is that this movie then looks like it was actually filmed in the 1890s.
Exactly,
right?
that too, right? But there's this quilt on her bed that's like yellow and blue, and like I was shocked at how well those colors stick out with like the film technique they use, because you're not going to get that popping color with like a black, because the black's going to be faded out. But like softer colors like that, I was like, wow, that looks incredible. And then I started thinking like, I wonder what blood's going to look like in the snow. And it looked fucking good, dude. That ending.
I mean, at the last 20 minutes of the movie, I don't think were exposed. So I think that's part of the reason. I think that is a conscious choice. And I think that's a good choice to not do the exposure for the final act.
Really? Because I thought that's why that red popped so well. I guess it was just 70s.
I mean, I would say I'm going to guess that because of the snow that you don't want to do it, and because you really do want it to look better in the snow. So I'm going to guess that that's the reason. But I think
for sure it does pop though. I mean, when he shoots that,
I really do. I think the look of this movie is one of the selling points.
For sure, I love the look of this, and then some of the symbolism, and then some of the characters. Like we got this guy in the background of the movie who's kind of like, I guess, a preacher, and we don't really know that until the end of the movie when McCabe
what a great payoff.
McCabe comes to him and is like, well, he doesn't come to me. He goes to the church just to look out the top window, comes back down, and he realizes the preacher took his gun, and he's like, get out of here. This is the house of God. And then Payback's a bitch, because like, what a dick move to do. The dude is like, builds up your town, and then you want to point his own shotgun at them and then kick him out. And then because he's holding a gun, gets shot himself. So that was very poignant, I guess. But also the fact that now the church is burning, and now all the townspeople are freaking out, and they're trying to put this like fire out. But at the same time, McCabe is like bleeding to death in the snow, and no one knows because like everyone's focused on the fire. So again, it's like, not only did this influence Deadwood, but I think this really influenced The Revenant in terms of like those bleak final moments of a Western, of like a dark Western like this, or not a dark Western, I should say, like a Western like unconventional, I should say. And then you look at The Revenant, it's kind of very similar, like the main character protagonist dying in the snow alone while everyone else is like doing something else, but he gets his kind of like revenge, and that's kind of what happens here. And he's, he doesn't get to see the town prosper after that, but he, deep down, I think we all know that because of this, or because of him starting this saloon, whorehouse, that this town actually prospers because of it. And that's kind of like the irony of like a lot of this Western expansion during this time, is like the heart of America was gambling and prostitution, and that's what grew the economy in these Western states that were expanding, and then finally became from territory to state. So I think that's what, that's part of my love for Deadwood, and I could clearly see it in this movie. So that's why I really attached myself to this movie, because of those themes. And it's just, of course, the irony of America growing and kind of hiding its past very much well fits with this kind of movie.
Yeah, I like some Westerns, but like I'm not into like the John Wayne Western, like the typical, that motif. But I think what makes this movie work is the fact that it is so against the idea of being a traditional Western, that I think that's what makes it succeed so well. And I think that even though Julie Christie isn't on screen, like her presence is very much felt throughout the movie, and I think that's what has such an impact. And I think that, again, Warren Beatty bringing like what I would define as kind of this himbo energy, Like he's so confident, but he's so dumb. Like he's so dumb, and like his stupidity is ultimately what costs him his life. Like he is not able to survive because he doesn't realize that he's being outwitted by bigger capitalists than he is. And I think that's what's really special about this movie is that they have an interest in telling a story that you don't typically see in a movie like this because your protagonist, so to speak, is not a good person. He's in fact a terrible, terrible human being. But I was just so impressed by this movie, and that is why I would give this an 8 out of 10. Like I don't think this is really connected with me on a visceral level like Nashville did, because I think a Western, I just have a harder time with Westerns in general, but this is definitely a must watch in terms of this genre.
Yeah, I think that's why I attach myself more to this than Nashville, because I'm more of the Western guy, and my love for Deadwood and all these connections.
We might need to do Kevin Costner's Horizon at some point.
We'll see. Timing, is a factor in that, but we'll see. But I want to also mention Keith Carradine again. Like, he was great in Nashville. He's great in this, even though he's got this small role. But it actually impacts the film, because it's like, oh shit. Okay, so basically what happens is he's staying at the whorehouse. He's about to leave. He's going to go into the store and get some new socks. But of course, these bounty hunters, prospectors, or whatever that were hired to take out McCabe and get the property or whatever, they're pretty much holed up at the store, like holding it up, like not as like for ransom or anything, but just like staying there and scaring everybody, intimidating everybody. And the poor Keith Carradine character, he's like dumb-witted, but he's like such a handsome dude that he's so naive, and it's like he's so naive that he gets tricked into like pulling out his gun and then gets shot and killed in front of everybody. And it's like, oh my God, that was like, holy shit, like the stakes have just completely changed, because that's like the first major murder in the movie. And it's just like, okay, so we got to kill these guys. How are we going to kill these guys? And then you realize, oh shit, McCabe is the one that's going to have to kill these guys, and the dude's an idiot. So what are we going to do? So that was my whole thinking, like, how is this guy going to take these guys out if he's not so smart? And then you can kind of tell, like, he fucked up a couple times. I don't know if you noticed, like, instead of this one dude who he shoots in the chest, he should have shot him in the head. And I think I'm referring to the scene at the end.
We've seen enough action movies at this point to know that you always go for the head.
Go for the fucking head, because then he gets shot in the leg and he gets shot in the stomach.
Again, that's part of what the magic of this. I mean, guns are not nearly as accurate at this time either.
That's true too. But my goodness, the guy was like in line for a headshot, and I felt like that was a missed opportunity. But I think that's because, again, McCabe is like. Also, there's also this story that like he killed this person in a different town like long ago, but apparently people don't believe in that whole story. So we as an audience don't know whether or not he's actually killed someone before. So the people that are like hunting him down are like, this dude has never killed anyone in his life. This dude's an idiot. And then we see as an audience like maybe he did kill that person because he's willing and able to kill these people like no problem. So maybe he did kill that person. I don't know, but that's kind of part of the myth. Or the mythos of this movie is to like whether or not this guy is actually like
again. I think that's part of the
gunfighter that he's supposed to be. Yeah, that's part of it. So I like that a lot, and I'm glad we don't really know whether or not he was, but I guess he does step it up at the end. So, and it's another kind of like message about drugs, I guess you want to say, like the opium epidemic.
It's not totally clear. Like it's clear like he's in some state of being out of it, but that's not totally clear. But yeah, they're definitely going for something there. Like she clearly knows what happens, and it's not good. And it's again, this is such an interesting movie because it's so different from a lot of things that we have reviewed, because there's so many layers to it and different interpretations. And again, this is so much more character driven than it is plot driven. But I think in terms of being an anti-Western, this is something that's really successful. And it is no surprise that someone like Robert Altman would do this as a follow-up to MASH, because he clearly has more power and is able to make something that, while still star-driven, definitely definitely not as mainstream-friendly as you would say, as I would say MASH is.
For sure. I mean, it's got a lot of controversial subjects about it. Obviously, prostitution, gambling, that kind of thing. Bloody shootout at the end. But in all honesty, this is like a really like great sustaining plot that I wanted so much more, and I could see why that Deadwood became what it was, because it's like so many storylines to expand upon and so many different characters to explore. Like there was a lot left on the table for this movie for sure, and that's why I felt like there was a lot more on the bone than what we got. But because again, this is a 2-hour movie, and Nashville's 240. But man, like there was so much more that I wanted to know about and kind of like explore. But again, that's kind of, I guess, part of the charm of this movie is that it leaves you wanting more, which is, I guess, is always a good thing. But man, highly recommend this. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think this is going to grow on me as I get older, because I think even in 4K, I think it's going to look even more of like, wow, like there's something about the way that they filmed this and the stock and the film stock and the way they expose the lighting and all that kind of thing. And it's just really a unique feeling in this movie. Like it's a unique feel. So definitely wanted to point that out. And also wanted to point out that I guess this is the first movie that we actually see someone on screen drinking a raw egg, and that wasn't Rocky. So that kind of blew my mind. And it's not even that he's just drinking a raw egg. He's drinking a raw egg with whiskey, which is like the most baller, badass move I've ever seen in terms of like drinking, because that's disgusting. But the fucker, Warren Beatty, actually drank it on camera.
Fathom doing that. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of firsts, because next week we're going to be talking about somebody eating spinach.
And it's not a cartoon. So, that's a big little clue right there. It's Popeye, ladies and gentlemen. What else could it be? But when I watched Popeye as a kid, ladies and gentlemen, it wasn't what I expected, because I was expecting like the cartoonish stuff. But with that Robert Altman spin to it,
this is going to be one of the more interesting ones. So every director of this era, everybody from Spielberg with 1941, Martin Scorsese, New York, New York, Heaven's Gate, every one of these directors has their boondoggle. This is Robert Altman's boondoggle, and it is so fascinating. We're going to be talking about Shelley Duvall. Like, this comes out the same year as The Shining. This is Robin Williams' first big movie, coming off of Mork and Mindy. I am very excited. I have never seen Popeye. I have seen the cartoon, but I've never seen this movie, and I am so excited to do so.
I'm shocked that it actually has the slapstick from the cartoon, which I did not expect as a kid. Like I said, I watched this as a kid, did not know what to expect, forgot like most of it, but I do remember the fight sequences and the fact that I'm still not sure if those were Robin Williams' actual like forearms, because I don't know, because we all know Popeye's jacked, but my goodness, those forearms were jacked.
I cannot imagine that Robin Williams is going on steroids like actors do today.
I don't know, man, but the makeup job on his muscles was just, it's something to behold, because it just so looks like he's so jacked up for this role, but it's just like, it's so good because it's all like muscle foam. So there you go.
All right, Brian, anything else? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, like I mentioned last week, like Robert Altman doesn't always do plotless movies. Like this clearly has a plot, and I really recommend it because, like, my goodness, I've been wanting to watch this movie for a while. And then once we planned Robert Altman month last year, I was like, okay, I'm going to finally hold off and just watch it for the month. And this is my first time watching the film, and I was generally just pleased with everything about it. So, like I said, I think right now it's an 8 out of 10, but it might actually grow to even maybe an 8.5 or 9 over time. But right now it's in that sweet spot, and I definitely want to check this out again in the future and probably even get a 4K cut.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get a 4K cut, because I don't even know what that's gonna look like. But I'm very excited to see what we have next week with Popeye, and then the following week with The Player. For Brian, I am Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.